I've always considered myself a bit of a bargain hunter, and I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit. So when I saw that old camera at the local thrift store, the gears in my head started to spin. See, I knew I could pick this thing up, test it out, see if it worked, or try and get it going, snap a few photos off to show to some of my hipster friends, and probably flip the thing for some cash deal. It was only $5, but it felt solid to the touch, heavy, definitely not cheap. I could tell someone had probably spent a lot of money on this thing back in the day. I tossed it in my basket and continued to browse the store. I grabbed a few odds and ends, but in the end didn't see anything else that really piqued my interest. Once I got home and settled in with a glass of wine and some music, I began to relax and started going over my new toy. There was some writing on the bottom. Leisha. A quick Google search told me this was a Leisha M3. I didn't know cameras that well. I had always just used my phone. But I had been right about this thing. It had been quite a big deal in its day. Not cheap at all. Now if it just worked, I could turn around and flip this thing, probably for quite the price to the right person. I found a local film shop that still sold old film, and the next day I brought my camera into the store. The clerk seemed impressed by my find, and when I told him where I found it, he seemed taken aback, even going so far as to offer me $100. At this point, I was pretty excited, and I didn't want to sell something off without fully understanding what I had, so I politely declined. I purchased a few rolls of the film I needed, which was surprisingly cheap, considering it wasn't exactly a common item anymore. And I knew if I had it equipped with some film, it'd make the sale just that much easier. Once I got home, I put it aside and got busy with a few other projects I had on the go. I ended up passing out on the couch after investing myself heavily into a logo design I had been working on for a friend's company. When I woke up, I had a hard time not immediately remembering the camera as it was sitting on my coffee table facing me when I woke up. It was really weird because I couldn't remember putting it there, but at the time I figured I must have, and ended up deciding to try it out. I did a quick search on YouTube to try and get an understanding for how this thing was supposed to work, and while doing so, quickly realized this thing, if it worked, could easily have been worth $1,000. No wonder the store owner had been so quick to offer me a lowball price. I'd have to go back in and give him a piece of my mind later on. Once I got acquainted with the basics of how this thing worked and loaded it with film, I wandered around my house and yard looking for generic, easy things to take nice photos of. I was no photographer, though I knew some basic easy shots that could look nice enough to impress a few friends and build some excitement. I went with the easiest. A few close-ups of books on a shelf with different lighting and angles. Took a long shot of a bench in my back garden. A steaming cup of coffee on my kitchen table. A few photos of the doorway leading into my hallway. You know, the usual easy crap most anyone can make look nice with a little effort. Now, one of the great things, or maybe awful things about these types of cameras, for all the kids out there who aren't familiar, is that you don't get to see your photos until you get them developed. Either you have a darkroom and develop them yourself, or you take them into a photo developer. Now, obviously, I was lacking a darkroom, so I opted to take them back to the film shop. The same guy was working in there, and I gave him some shit for his low offer, and he gave me some crap response about how he didn't even know if it worked and he could have lost money. Yeah, right. Anyways, I'd had to wait until tomorrow to see the pictures developed. So I went back home. Again, I'm a busy guy. So I put myself back to work. I usually have a few things on the go. And again, forgot all about the camera. But when I woke up again the next day, the camera was again just sitting facing me on the coffee table. I know. I have an awful tendency of passing out on my couch. But really, what the fuck, I thought. But being a practical thinker, I just figured I must have been looking it over again before I fell asleep. Later that day, I drove in to pick up my photos pretty excited to see if the camera actually worked. And to my surprise, they turned out mostly fine. Some of the close-ups of the books were a little blurry, most likely human error, and something I just need to fiddle with the focus a little and get used to it. But the shot of the bench in the backyard turned out great. It even surprised me a little I was the one who took such a nice photo. Flipping through the coffee photos, I was again pleasantly surprised. But once I got to the end and saw the pictures I took in my hallway, I noticed something in the doorway, some kind of obstruction, dirt of grease on the lens. No, it couldn't be. All of the pictures of the hallway had some darker blur area on them. I wasn't sure what to make of it at the time and figured I'd just turn on the lights and brighten the hallway up for the next round of shots. I got home, snapped a few more. Playing with the focus, I took some more close-ups of the books and tried the hallway shots again. I was going to take a few more pictures of the backyard when I ran out of film. I should have had 24 shots on the camera, but I ran out after about 20. At this point, I was mostly worried something was wrong with the camera, and I took it back to the store and explained the situation. $100 is still here, he teased a little, but he must have known I was a bit stressed out, because he offered to rush the development a bit for me and asked if I could come back in an hour. I left the film to be developed and went out to get a bite to eat. I was starving. I had been pretty consumed with this camera business. I sat down at my favorite local diner and grabbed a cup of coffee with the soup and sandwich deal combo. As I was finishing up, I saw a familiar face, my friend Anthony, which was very convenient because, like I said, I had some hipster friends, and some of them I knew I could talk into buying a camera like the one I had found. Anthony was just one such person, a well-meaning guy, but one with a bit too much money to spare, and a personality that made him want to try to stand out from the crowd by engaging in unique ventures. I knew the Leisha would be right up his alley. "Hey!" I called out. He turned to face me. "Whoa, fancy seeing you here of all places," he laughed. It was a lame inside joke, sort of. We always seemed to bump into each other here. I guess we both just loved the soup. We engaged in small talk for a few minutes before I changed the subject to the camera. I left out the part where I got it for $5 from a thrift store, and that a few photos had turned out a bit blurry, but the rest of it I told honestly. He was predictably excited about my find, and wanted to see the pictures and immediately agreed to tag along back to the camera store to retrieve my photos. The store clerk had the photos ready. He handed them to me with an awkward look. We didn't really exchange words. I just handed him the payment and left. To be honest, this hadn't really stood out to me until I got into my car and started sifting through the different shots. The shots of the books turned out great, as I had predicted. It was just human error, and the need to sort out the focus dial a little bit. But the rest of the shots inside my home told a different story. Instead of slight blurs, there were pretty solid objects. I call them objects, but no, they were people. Well, two people, a young child and a man. They were both blurry though, a bit faded, although the rest of the photo was clear. Though the people weren't too clear, I could still make out that the child was a very young boy, about 4 to 6. I couldn't make out much detail on his face, but he was wearing some kind of school uniform I didn't recognize. The man was quite overweight, a large burly type, and he was wearing a wife beater that looked dirty and stained. Again, I couldn't make out too much detail on his face. "You into some weird shit?" Anthony asked, pawing over the remaining photos. Confused, I took them from him to inspect the remaining pictures, unsure of what weird shit he was referring. Nothing could have prepared me for these last 4 pictures. Remember how I told you earlier that I was a few shots short on the film? Well, now I knew where they went. There were 4, all very similar of me. And before you ask, I live alone. Me sleeping on the couch at night. Each photograph was almost identical, same angle, me in the same position. The only difference was that behind the couch, peering over me from behind the couch in the final photo, was a rough outline of the boy's face. His wide-open eyes just staring at me. Jesus Christ. What the fuck? I asked, startled. This obviously had me unnerved, but I was glad to have someone there in the car with me. This your idea of a joke? I mean, it's pretty, I don't know, involved. I guess if I were in his position, my mind would be full of doubt as well. As frustrating as it was, I couldn't exactly blame him. Anthony waited in the car, and I took the photographs back into the store. I'm not entirely sure what I was expecting from the store owner, but I didn't really know what to do. I did my best to calmly explain that no one else was supposed to be in the photographs and that I had no idea how the pictures of me sleeping ended up on there. Just the way he looked at me, I could tell he didn't believe a word I was saying. Right, okay. Yeah, well, the two in the hallway photos struck me as kind of odd, not gonna lie. Creeped me right out. Also, side note to any kids out there who don't know about older cameras, when you got your photos developed, some weird strangers would always see them before you did. Seriously, check out the movie 1 Hour Photo with Robin Williams someday. It's a pretty good crash course into how potentially creepy this is. Anyways, the guy explained it might be some kind of double exposure thing. Maybe there had been a problem with the film. Maybe he had made a mix-up. He tried his best to offer a reasonable explanation, though really I think his mind was made up just like Anthony's that I was full of shit. He offered me a roll of film for free under the possibility that the issue had been on him and his store as a peace offering, and I left. I left and got back in my car. My friend was still sitting patiently, an amused look on his face. I'm not sure what the angle is. Maybe you want to sell that camera or something. But the day you try and sell me on a ghost story is the day I call you out on your shit. He laughed, although it came off a bit nervously. I really couldn't shake the fear I had in me. I kept trying to rationalize things. Maybe the camera had malfunctioned. Maybe there really had been some fault with the film. But no, I'm a pretty skeptical person when it comes to the paranormal, but in this case, I couldn't reason with it. Something fucked up was going on. Maybe I had best just ditch the camera. I could just turn around and try selling it to the store clerk or just throw it up on eBay or Craigslist at this point. But that little voice in my head was just demanding answers. I had taken loads of photos at home in the past, and I had never seen anything out of the ordinary in them. Besides, it was a newer building, put up in the early 90s, not exactly the perfect setting for a ghost-infested home. And there seemed to be two of them, a boy and a man. There must be some explanation, in the end. Anthony spoke up. You look shook. Come on, man, it's probably nothing. Just some fluke with the film, you know? Let's go snap a few outdoors type pictures. I'd love to try that thing out anyways. That worked with me. I could test out the film, see if any similar issues come up, and at least let Anthony get a good feel for the camera. That's what this was all about anyways. Besides, I'm a naturally curious person, and I felt the need to find out more. I couldn't just walk away from this whole thing without trying to figure out what was going on. We ended up at a small park on the riverbank. Typical city park. A few people around, scattered benches, some playground equipment for kids off to the side. I took a few different shots, including of the sky. I wanted to capture as much light as possible. I was taking a problem-solving approach at this point, not really looking for good photos. I had enough of those to show off. I wanted to see if I could find the problem. I finished off the reel, reloaded it, and handed the leash off to Anthony, who took off around the park, snapping photos with the predictable enthusiasm I knew he'd have. The guy just loves to be different. I guess that's not so bad. The stress of the day, coupled with the warm weather, finally started to weigh on me. I found a bench in the shade and sat down to try and relax. Anthony was off snapping close-ups of the playground equipment now. Thank God there weren't any kids at the park today. I could just imagine worried parents shuffling their kids away from my weird friend. That thought made me laugh, and I started to relax. I closed my eyes. Not realizing how tired I'd been, I started to drift off. The sound the trees made while the wind delivered a nice summer cool breeze over my body really did it for me. As I drifted in and out of lucidness in that moment where reality and dream seemed to collide into one state of mind, my senses of sound and feeling became heightened. The creaking of the tree branches overhead, the soft howl of the summer breeze as it wove its way through the park. Its soft edges stroked the tips of my hairs, sending a deep shiver down my spine. The sound of a child off laughing somewhere in the distance. Someone nearby was talking. A deep voice. Whatever they were saying I could not make out, but the tone of that voice carried so perfectly. I really didn't need to hear what was being said. They were angry, brash, barking demands at somebody, at the child. The child's laughter was now replaced with sobbing. Again that voice, booming, barking demands. I woke up with a start, jolting forward on the park bench. Anthony was standing in front of me. "Whoa, was just asking if you wanted to take off. I didn't realize how tired you must be, man." I was confused. How long had I been sitting here sleeping on this bench? I looked around. Me and Anthony had the whole park to ourselves. No one else was here, although I could have sworn I heard a child. Had that other voice really just been my friend trying to wake me up? I was genuinely confused. I must have been tired. What a fucking day though, right? I guess it's to be expected. I clearly needed to get home for some rest. How long was I here? I so didn't mean to pass out on a park bench. I chuckled. Gaining my balance, I stood up from the bench. I'm not sure. I don't think I was too long, really. 10, maybe 15 minutes? Anthony looked concerned. Hey, you don't look so well. Are you okay to drive? I reached out, stretching my arms into the air. Yeah, I'll drop you back off downtown. I had to get the film off for development anyways. Sure, man. I don't know what you're doing with that camera, or what sort of story's behind it, but if you're ever in the mood to sell it, let me know, will ya? Now I know I should have just sold it to him at this point. Fuck whatever the problem was with that damn thing and just let it be someone else's problem, out of my hands and life. But at this point, I had become consumed by the mystery of it all. I really needed to know what the hell was going on. Sure, I replied. Maybe, just not right now. I realized I was turning down my original end goal, but at this point, I wasn't all that interested, at least not until I knew more. From my experiences in life, it was usually best to hold on to something until you understood what it was that you had, though in this situation I was beginning to wonder if this was an exception to that rule. Downtown, I dropped my friend off near the diner where we met. He assured me his car was parked just around the corner and that he'd be fine. Just get some sleep. Take care of yourself. Text me tomorrow, he said, getting out of my car. Next, I went just around the corner where the camera shop was. The clerk seemed a bit hesitant at the idea of me being back again, though he took the film canisters and sold me a few more rolls as well. Afterwards, I went home. Going inside, I left the camera in my car. I didn't want that thing in my house while I slept. Now, as scary and fucked up as this day had been, the second I got inside and put my head down on a pillow, I passed right out. This time in my bed, and not on the couch as usual. However, as fate would have it, I wasn't going to get much rest that night. According to my phone, it was just after 2 a.m. when I woke up to a loud crash. I couldn't be sure as I had been sleeping, but it sounded very close. Definitely inside my house. I crept out of bed to investigate, my heart thumping up seemingly into my throat. I reached for my bedroom door. My fingers crept out into the darkness, fumbling in fear for the door. They awkwardly grasped air a few times before locking on to turn the knob. Slowly opening the door to avoid making noise, I suddenly became very aware of the sound of my own breathing. I tried to control myself, but this made breathing feel forced and difficult somehow, and sent me breathing heavier, gasping for breath. As the door opened, I peered out into my hallway, looking for any sign of anything amiss. My eyes were still adjusting to the darkness when suddenly, I saw a flash of darkness cross the living room. Footsteps, very heavy but very quick, as if someone were running around out there. I was frozen with fear, cowering in my own home, in the doorway to my bedroom. Hello? I called out feebly. Who's there? Suddenly the footsteps stopped. Whoever or whatever was there, I seemed to have their attention. Again I called out, this time with slightly more confidence. Who's there? This time they were lighter, but much quicker. For a second I saw him. The little boy. He was running down the hallway, his face full of fear. Before I could register what was actually going on, the living room began to fill in unnatural darkness. My eyes, that had begun adjusting slightly to the dark of night, now strained against the darkness. Fear had completely taken over, my breathing now coming out in short, sharp bursts. There was no sign of the boy who had just been there, only seconds before. Now the darkness was beginning to rapidly fill the hallway. I could barely see. In fact, I couldn't see anything, not even the door immediately beside me. Suddenly, a brutal force of strength pushed me out of the way and sent me flying across my room. I smacked into my dresser, knocking over the lamp that had been perched on top. It shattered to the floor. My bedroom door slammed shut. At least I assumed it was my bedroom door. It was too dark to see. I felt my way around my bedroom in that darkness. In total fear, I sought out my bed and cowered under the cover. I did not dare move. I sat there frozen under my blankets, shaking, and I admit I may have soiled myself. I can't begin to put words to how I felt. It was overwhelming. In fact, I sat there, barely moving under my blanket until the first rays of sunlight began to creep inside, and I could see them coming through that blanket which had been my sanctuary that night. I worked myself up and dared venture out far enough to grab my phone, which was still sitting on my end table. I went to check the time, but the battery must have been dead. It didn't turn on. Breathing heavily, I worked myself up the courage to come out of hiding, and I crawled out from under that blanket and took a look around the room, half hoping I had imagined the whole thing. The lamp, however, still lay shattered on the floor. My bedroom door had indeed been closed behind me. What I saw in the middle of the floor almost made me want to crawl back up under the covers and hide away again. The camera sat perfectly centered on my bedroom floor, the front lens facing the bed where I had spent the night cowering. I made a mad dash out of the house, stopping only to change out for a clean pair of pants and to scoop up that awful camera. Not that I particularly wanted to lug it around with me again, but I definitely didn't want it in my house any longer. Pocketing my car keys off the kitchen counter, I ran out the door. I didn't even bother locking up. If someone wanted to break into my house and steal everything I had, they could deal with whatever the fuck was going on in there. The clock in my car told me it was only 6 a.m. Not much I could do. The city I live in isn't really a large place. This time of morning, not too much is open. Besides, I only really had one destination. That was the camera shop downtown. I parked nearby and hunkered down in my car. My phone was dead, and I didn't want to run the engine for the radio. I mostly just wanted peace and to be near people. The camera was sitting in the front on the passenger side. I wanted to just throw it out, smash it to pieces. Would that really stop what was going on? I had seen enough scary movies to convince myself this probably wouldn't work. Besides, part of me still needed to know just what the hell was going on. Besides, the empty roll of film in the camera had magically filled up last night, and I planned on seeing what was going on in those photos. I sat there waiting until I saw the shopkeeper actually approaching the store to unlock for the day. I had barely slept. I hadn't shaven in a few days. I was a wreck. So when I approached him on the street that early morning, he was understandably caught off guard. "Oh, come on, you again, man, no. I don't want any part in whatever shit you're trying to pull. I've seen some crazy shit in my years here, but I want no part in whatever it is you got going on." He tried to go in and close the door behind him, but I was quick enough to bar the door open. "Just hear me out. I got no idea what's going on. I just need my pictures, please. I need to know." He sighed. He glared at me for what felt like several minutes. "Wait here," he said finally, before stepping into his back room. He came out with 2 envelopes of photographs. "Just take these, and get the hell out. Please just leave me alone." Reaching out, I took the photo sets, though truthfully I was terrified to even look at them alone right now. I handed him the roll of film that had been in the camera last night when I went to bed. He just stared at it. "No way, I'm done." I reached in my wallet and produced a $100 bill. "Last time, I'll leave you be after this, but I need them done quickly." He didn't say a word. He just slowly reached out and took the money and the film. His head sunk, his chin digging into his chest. He turned and went into the back and got to work developing my photos, only to come out occasionally to serve a customer. I waited quietly in the shop, thumbing through the odd magazine or catalog laying around the store trying to distract myself. He was done, even before an hour was up. He had the photos ready to go. He handed them to me with a finality in his approach. "Leave," he mouthed. I took the final photos and hopped in my car, the camera still sitting on my passenger side seat, and drove myself over to Anthony's house. I rang the doorbell, no answer, so I rang again and again. Finally, Anthony came to the door, warily peeping through the window before opening the door. "Brian, what are you doing out this early? Thought you were gonna text me." I pushed past him and came inside. I sat down and just started from the beginning. The entire sequence of events, start to finish as I have laid them out here. He just sat there and listened intently as I went over everything from finding the camera at the thrift store to the weird splotches in the original photos, to the man and the boy that had been appearing in the second set, and finally to the horrific events of last night. Then I handed him the 2 envelopes of photos, while still keeping the ones developed that morning in my possession. He opened the first one and started thumbing through it. "These must be the ones you took. A few of the sky. Nothing weird." "Oh, what the fuck is this?" he asked, producing a photo I must have snapped of the tree line. In the photo it was clear. The man was standing near the trees, holding a balloon on a long string. He continued thumbing through the photographs, producing another one. It was one of my photos of the sky, which I really just took to let as much light into the lens as possible to see if there was any sort of weird damage to the camera, but in this photo I could see the same balloon floating away. Anthony cleared his throat. I think I'd have remembered seeing this guy here. I held back my emotions. It was nice to talk this over with someone who wasn't treating me like a nutcase. I wasn't sure if he was going to take me seriously or not, but this was a huge relief. Next, he opened the next set of photos. He took a quick look through them before dropping them on the table in front of him, his hands going to his face and pressing in. He had clearly been spooked. I picked them up and quickly realized why. He had taken a lot of photographs around the play equipment, and the boy was showing up pretty clearly. Quite a few photos showed him staring back at the camera as if he was aware there was someone there taking photographs of him. As the photos progressed, they told a chilling story. The man from the tree line approached, carrying the balloon. The next photo, the man is handing the boy the balloon, and after, the boy is being carried off towards the tree line by the man. Trembling, I picked up the final envelope of photographs off my lap and put them on the table. These photos I did not take. They were on the film this morning, when I found the camera on my bedroom floor. Anthony picked them up and opened the envelope for me. "Holy shit, dude. No." I reached out. A feeling of doom had come over me, and took the stack of pictures from him. All 24 were of my bed. With the blankets askew, I could tell I was under there, cowering. I didn't think the lights had come on, so how these had captured the room so well was beyond me. Only in each photo I wasn't alone. There was a long, dark shadow dominating the room. I just knew it was the man. And the boy was standing there at the foot of my bed, standing in what looked to be stained underwear. Each photo his face became clearer and clearer. The horror in his eyes became more and more vivid, and by the end, you could easily make out the tears running down his face. I dropped the photographs back on the table, sitting there, terrified, unsure of what to do next. Was I supposed to call the cops? A priest? Who? After a few minutes of silence, Anthony spoke up. "Got any more film for that thing?" I was shocked. "Are you insane? Did we just see 2 entirely different things here, or what?" He let out a short, nervous laugh. "No, just I've watched a few horror movies in my life, enough to know that whatever you're going through, our best bet is to see it through to the end. You see, the original photos, you told me these shapes are very blurry, almost undefined, but they become more clear over time. Let's see what happens when we go forward." Anthony was a good friend. It was nice to have him on my side for this one. The guy at the camera shop won't develop any more film for me. I actually laughed this time. Anthony's face lit up too. Who cares? I don't think we even need to see the pictures. Besides, if we do, there are other places we can go to get them developed. I agreed, and shortly we were in my car, driving back to my house. This all felt kind of silly, and as nervous as I was, I couldn't believe what was going on. I remember thinking hopefully he wouldn't see my shitty pants on the floor. When we arrived, everything was as I left it. My room was chaotic, broken lamp, messy sheets, etc. I figured the best place to start snapping photos was the hallway. I loaded in the film. As Anthony said, we didn't necessarily need to get the photos developed, just take more of them. At the time, I'm not sure I could entirely follow his reasoning, but now I definitely see what he meant. So I started just snapping pictures, one after the other. About halfway through the first roll, I heard a loud crash, I think from inside my room. Just keep going, never mind that, Anthony encouraged. I finished off the first roll of film and reloaded. Anthony stepped in and took the camera from me at this point and started just snapping photos off. Another loud crash, he kept going anyways. He continued snapping photo after photo, stopping again to put in another film canister. The bedroom door started flailing open and closed. I started backing up, but Anthony kept going. Let's get out of here, I urged, but he wasn't listening. The bedroom door was now wide open, and I could see it forming, quickly. Blackness. The same blackness that had enveloped my home last night. This time I grabbed my friend by the arm, trying to drag him with me, but he wasn't having any of it. He shoved me away, backwards towards the front door. He was still trying to take pictures, but I could tell the reel was empty. Let's go, I screamed, but he just sat there, staring through the lens, trying to snap more photos even though he must have known he was out of film. The darkness had filled the bedroom and was beginning to wisp out into the hallway like a thick black smoke. I was still on the ground. I started crawling backwards before fumbling to get up and run. The blackness had come out of the bedroom and had wrapped itself around Anthony's legs, and was coming for me next. I bolted out of the house and got in my car. Starting it up, I heard my friend's screams. I hate to admit this, but I kept going. I just got the car started and started pulling out of the laneway. I could see the darkness wafting out of the doorway I left open in my haste to escape, evaporating like smoke in the wind. But inside the house I could see was pitch black. Through every window, all I could see was a darkness unlike any other. I drove the hell away from there, and now have checked into a hotel on the edge of town. I'm writing this so hopefully my friend's family can have some account of what happened. And I hope they know. I am very sorry for leaving him like that. I am not sure what has become of him, as I am too scared to go back home now, and I do not know what to do. At least the camera isn't here now. I guess I'll see if it's here when I wake up.